It started with Claire's voice. I was sitting at the kitchen table, halfway through my morning tea, when I heard her call out from the attic. Edward, can you come up here a sec? It wasn't a panicked yell, more like confusion. Still, something in her tone made me set the mug down and head upstairs. Our attic hadn't seen much use since our youngest moved out, mostly just boxes of old Christmas decorations and forgotten paperwork. The ladder creaked beneath me as I climbed. When I reached the top, Claire was crouched in the far corner, surrounded by open boxes and dusty old folders. She looked up as I stepped into the low-ceilinged space, holding something in her hands. It was a small, worn leather-bound book. The edges were curled, the spine cracked from use. Claire let out a nervous little laugh. I think I found one of my old college journals. Probably something embarrassing. Don't judge me too hard. I didn't laugh. She handed it to me, and I saw the gold initials CH pressed into the cover. I flipped it open. The pages were filled with tight, slanted handwriting. Familiar. Claire's. My eyes scanned the first page. A date from the early 90s. She'd titled the entry, Peru, Field Site Number 3. I read silently for a moment. Then my voice took over before I even realized it. Daniel and I hiked back from the riverbank late again tonight. We didn't mean to stay so long, but the stars were too perfect. I let myself forget about Edward for a while. In Daniel's arms, I feel freer than I've ever felt. If only Edward would stop hesitating. I don't know how much longer I can wait for him to commit. Claire shifted uncomfortably, brushing dust off her jeans. That was forever ago. We weren't even married yet, remember? I didn't say anything. I kept turning the pages. One entry after another, all from her field research years overseas. It's not what it sounds like, she said, inching toward me. Those were just silly thoughts. I was in a weird place. That's all. I was probably exaggerating. But I kept reading. There was another passage, clinical in tone, almost like it was data. Names, locations, little sketches in the margins. She wrote about nights under tents, wine-soaked conversations, bodies pressed close, out of necessity. More than one name appeared. Daniel, Marcus, even a local guide named Luis. Each entry hit harder than the last. Claire tried to smile, but it faltered. Look, I probably romanticized some of it. You know how people are when they're young. It was just writing. It doesn't mean. How long did this go on? I asked, not looking at her. She paused. I don't remember. It wasn't serious. You and I were still figuring things out then. I shut the book. My hands were trembling, and I didn't want them to. I didn't want to give her that satisfaction, but I knew she wasn't looking for victory. She was terrified. I thought we built this life together, I said quietly. She opened her mouth, but no words came. Downstairs, the kettle clicked off. The attic was silent except for the groan of old beams underfoot. I turned toward the ladder. Edward. I didn't respond. The journal was still in my hand. I didn't speak to Claire for the rest of that day. She stayed quiet too, tiptoeing around the house like a guest afraid to overstay. I spent most of the afternoon in my study, the journal beside me, flipping through pages like I was studying for some devastating exam. And every entry, every name, date, detail, cut a little deeper. There were sketches on the back pages, hastily drawn outlines of sleeping bags, riverside fires, bare shoulders. Some of the drawings were marked with initials and annotated like she was documenting specimens, not people. One margin note read simply, "Tried not to moan his name too loud. Tent walls are thin." I thought I knew who my wife was. But that version of her, the careful, logical, loving woman I'd built a life with, felt like a ghost now. The one in this journal? She was a stranger. Shameless. Almost proud of what she had done. Late in the afternoon, I found a photograph tucked between the back pages. It wasn't printed on glossy photo paper, just a faded Polaroid, wrinkled at the corners. Claire was in the center, topless except for a brightly colored woven cloth draped around her chest. Her hair was longer than Messier. She was laughing. On either side of her were 4 shirtless men, all smiling, clearly local colleagues or field partners. I stared at it for a long time. When I walked into the kitchen, Claire was sitting at the table, hands wrapped around a cold cup of tea she hadn't touched. She looked up, eyes bloodshot. "I was going to tell you about it someday," she whispered. I just didn't know how. I dropped the photo on the table in front of her. She flinched like I'd slapped her. "You told me Daniel was just a friend," I said. "All those years, when I asked about your research trips, you said nothing happened. You lied." I didn't know how to explain it back then. "It wasn't like I was trying to hurt you. You wrote about him like you were planning a life together," I said, my voice rising. "And you stayed with me because what?" "I proposed first." Her voice cracked. "I was young. I was confused. You were the stable one, the one I could picture building a home with. But Daniel, he was just passion, a phase." I stared at her, disgusted. "You don't get to rewrite it now. You don't get to clean it up. I'm not trying to excuse it, she said, suddenly desperate. I'm trying to explain it. I didn't love those other men. Not really. You and I, we built something real. I shook my head. You built it on a lie. There was nothing theatrical about what I did next. I walked upstairs, pulled a suitcase from the closet, and dropped it on the bed. Claire followed me, still pleading, her words tripping over each other. Please, Edward, don't do this. We've been married 28 years. And how many of those years were spent wondering if I was the fallback option? I muttered. She tried to grab my arm. I pulled away. Go stay at Maggie's, I said. Tonight. Her mouth opened. Closed. Finally, she nodded. An hour later, I stood at the front window, watching her car disappear down the road. The journal was still in my hand. Claire had been gone for less than 48 hours when the whispers started. I hadn't planned on telling anyone, not at first. But something snapped when I sat down at the Rotary Club breakfast that Tuesday and saw Claire's face smiling back at me from a group photo on the club's Women in Service bulletin board. Someone asked how she was doing. I didn't answer. I just reached into my briefcase and pulled out the journal. By the end of that morning, everyone in that room knew what kind of woman Claire really was. I didn't read the worst entries, not the ones with the hotel coordinates or the phrase, his taste still on my tongue. But I read enough. Enough to make sure no one looked at her the same way again. She wrote about it like it was academic, I told them. Clinical. Detached. Like she was recording data. Except the data was every man she ever slept with while we were together. They were all quiet. Except Dan Murphy, who muttered into his coffee, Jesus, Ed. I nodded. Yeah, Jesus is right. By noon, it had reached the school faculty. One of the junior teachers, probably Jen Franklin, asked me if I was doing okay. I told her the truth. That I wasn't. Then I told her the rest. That night, Claire called me from Maggie's ranch. I didn't answer. So she texted instead. Claire, please don't make this worse than it already is. Claire, can we talk in person? I didn't reply. Apparently Maggie had told her about the rumors. About what I'd shared. Claire was furious, but that fury didn't come across in her voice when she called Olivia. Our daughter. She tried to soften it, to make it sound like youthful stupidity. But by then, it was too late. I know because Olivia called me later that night, sobbing. She said it was normal, Olivia cried. That everyone makes mistakes when they're young. She lied to me too, I said. I don't even know who she is anymore. I didn't know how to respond to that. So I let the silence speak. 2 days later, Claire tried calling again, this time to Ben, our son. He didn't pick up. He never said much in emotional moments, but when he's silent, really silent, that's when he's the most upset. She must have felt it too. So she tried again with Olivia. This time, on video. But Olivia was ready. She'd taken screenshots of some of the journal entries. Claire had shared them during their call, trying to prove it wasn't that bad. Olivia showed me one. I wish Edward would stop dragging his feet. Daniel makes me feel like a woman. I'm tired of waiting for comfort when passion is right in front of me. Claire thought she was being clever. Bet somehow, showing it to Olivia would put it to rest. But it only made it worse. I can't look at her the same way, Olivia said, wiping her eyes. She was always my example of what a strong woman looked like. But now, she didn't finish. She didn't need to. Claire had lost more than just her marriage. She'd lost the only people who ever looked at her without suspicion. And this time, there was no attic to hide in. Olivia didn't tell me she had ordered the DNA test. She just showed up at my house a week after the video call with Claire, her face pale and eyes rimmed red. She had that quiet, mechanical way about her, like she was going through motions she didn't want to acknowledge. I mailed it in last Monday, she said, sitting stiff on the couch. Swabbed both of us. You and me. I didn't say anything at first. My throat closed around the words. I had never questioned it. Not once. Olivia was mine. She always had been brown-eyed, sharp-witted, stubborn in the exact way Claire used to be in her 20s. I had changed her diapers, taught her to ride a bike, stayed up with her when she had mono in 9th grade. She was mine, even if some bastard's DNA said otherwise. Why now? I finally asked. She shrugged, not meeting my eyes. There was a line in one of the entries. South Africa. Some guy named Willem. Mom wrote that she felt torn. Said she wished she could have waited to accept your proposal. I didn't remember proposing that early. But I guess time blurs when you don't know you're being lied to. Olivia swallowed hard. There was only 1 month between the trip and the engagement. We both knew what that meant. I reached out, touched her hand. No matter what the test says. She pulled away gently. I already got the results. I froze. She opened her phone, tapped the screen, and turned it toward me. The top line said it all. Paternal match, not detected. I stared at it for a long time. I wanted to feel something clear, rage, grief, maybe denial, but all I felt was the collapse of something too old and fragile to bear its own weight. Olivia was crying now. Silently. I didn't want it to be true, she whispered. I hoped it would be wrong. I wanted it to be a glitch or some lab error. I wanted you to still be my dad. I am, I said, my voice rough. I always will be. She shook her head, tears sliding down her cheeks. But you're not. Not really. I don't even know who I am anymore. She stood before I could respond, wiping her eyes with the sleeve of her sweater. I need time, she said, backing toward the door. Please don't call for a while. I need to figure out what any of this means. Then she was gone. I sat there in the quiet, the test results still glowing on her abandoned phone. Claire had always said the truth would set us free. But this truth? It only scattered us further. Pieces of a life I thought was whole, now broken beyond repair. Claire showed up on a Sunday morning without calling first. I heard the knock while I was boxing up old files in my office, transcripts, student evaluations, my last few years of notes from board meetings. I didn't expect to see her on the porch, hair pulled back, sweater sleeves tugged over her hands like she was bracing herself for winter, even though it was June. I'm just here to pick up a few more things, she said. I stepped aside without a word. The house was half-packed. Stacks of books lined the living room wall, boxes labeled, donate, and keep fighting for space. The walls were bare, no wedding photos, no family portraits. Just outlines where they used to hang, like the memories had been pulled off with the nails. She hovered near the kitchen, eyes drifting to the window. I heard you're moving. To Beaufort. Small place near the coast, I said. She nodded like she already knew. You always talked about retiring by the water. I always talked about a lot of things. She flinched at that. There was a long silence. Then she stepped forward, hands clenched. I've been going over everything, she said. Reading my own words again. Trying to understand what I was thinking back then. And I was selfish, she said quietly. Arrogant. I thought I could compartmentalize everything, my past, the things I did. That I could tuck them away and they'd never matter. But they did. They always did. I sat on the arm of the couch, arms folded. Claire, I wasn't perfect. I was slow to commit, too focused on my job, maybe too rigid. But I never lied to you. I never held pieces of myself back. I never wrote down proof that I was sleeping with other people while planning a life with you. She wiped at her cheek. I know that now. I didn't even get a choice. You took that from me. She stepped closer. I want to try. Therapy. Mediation. I don't care what it takes. I just don't want to lose 30 years over something that happened before we said, I do. It wasn't meaningless, Edward. What we built wasn't meaningless. I looked at her then, not as the woman I married, but as someone else entirely. Someone I didn't know. And maybe never had. You've always been good at controlling the narrative, I said. You told the stories. You decided what parts mattered, what parts didn't. For 3 decades, I believed we built something honest. We did. No, Claire. I did. You edited the truth until it fit the version you could live with. She opened her mouth to respond, but I stood before she could speak. We're already divorced in every way that counts, I said. The paperwork's just a formality. She didn't follow me when I walked to the garage. She didn't say goodbye. And when I pulled the boxes into the back of my car, I didn't look back. The first I heard of Nadine was from one of the other faculty wives during a grocery store run. Claire, she said with a careful smile, pausing near the apples, I didn't realize Edward was seeing someone already. I blinked. Excuse me. Nadine, she said, picking up a gala and pretending it mattered. They've been to the marina together. A couple times, actually. My throat went dry. Nadine Harker. Divorced. English department. The same Nadine who used to joke behind my back about my National Geographic sexcapades during a tenure meeting 15 years ago. The same woman who once told me, don't worry, some women aren't wired for monogamy after too many Chardonnays. I left my cart half full in the produce section and drove straight to Maggie's ranch. I barely made it out of the car before I checked my phone. And there it was. A text from Nadine, sent 20 minutes earlier. Nadine, I'm sure this is awkward, but he deserves someone honest. I stared at the screen. My fingers twitched. Then I typed a reply I shouldn't have. Me, you've always been second-rate. Enjoy the leftovers. I hit send. The second I did, I regretted it. I hadn't spoken to Edward since the day I walked out with my arms full of winter coats and wedding china. Now I was clawing at him through her. I was sinking. Maggie tried to be gentle. She told me to ignore it. Let him rebound. Move on. But I couldn't. Not when every time I stepped into town, I felt the whispers trailing behind me. The journal was public knowledge now. People didn't say it to my face, but I heard it in how they cleared their throats around me, and how they turned away just a bit too fast. And worst of all, they weren't just whispering about me anymore. They were whispering about Olivia. Did you hear? She took a test. He's not her real father. Do you think Claire knew? Of course she did. I could feel it all unraveling in real time. Not just my marriage, not just my reputation, but my motherhood. My children. My family. My shame mutated into something darker. I blamed Edward for making the journal public. For dragging it into the light. But deep down, I knew. I wrote it. I saved it. I boxed it and left it in our attic like a time bomb. And now, I had to live in the crater. I went back one last time the night before Edward moved out. The house looked strange, hollowed out, almost foreign. The walls were half bare, and the scent of his aftershave, once warm and familiar, was replaced by the musty smell of cardboard and packing tape. The furniture was arranged in clusters, like pieces waiting to be loaded onto a truck, and his old winter coat, the one he always refused to replace, was folded neatly on the arm of the couch. He didn't look surprised when he saw me. Just tired. You forgot to return the garage clicker, he said. I didn't come for the clicker. He nodded once, then turned back to the open box at his feet. He was sorting through our old photo albums, placing some in a pile and leaving others behind. I watched as he picked up a Christmas photo from Vermont. Olivia was 12, Ben was 9, and the three of us were laughing, red-cheeked, huddled in snow jackets. You're really leaving tomorrow? I asked. Edward didn't look up. U-Haul's coming at 7. I thought maybe we could talk. Not about the past. About what's left. He stood and wiped his hands on his jeans. There's nothing left, Claire. There hasn't been for a while. That's not true, I said, stepping closer. We built a life. A good one. It wasn't perfect, but it was real. You built a version of the truth you could live with, he said calmly. And I lived in it because I didn't know better. I opened my mouth, but nothing came out. He picked up a box labeled Study and set it by the door. You want closure, he said. But you had 30 years to come clean. You had every chance. I didn't think it would matter. I thought I could bury it. You didn't bury it. You documented it. Cataloged it like it was something to be proud of. I wasn't proud, I whispered. I was confused. Young. I loved you, Edward. I still do. He let out a hollow laugh. You don't get to say that now. Is this about Nadine? I asked suddenly. Is that why you won't even consider? He looked at me sharply. Don't give her that kind of power. This isn't about her. Then what? I begged. What is it about? It's about trust, he said flatly. It's about waking up and realizing that I never had the life I thought I had. It's about knowing my daughter isn't biologically mine and that I was the only one in the dark. It's about living beside someone who edited the story and then hid the pin. My eyes burned. Please. I just want a chance to fix it. Edward looked around the room at the half-packed boxes, the shadows of frames that once held our life together. We're already ghosts in this house, he said softly. There's nothing left to fix. Then he picked up his keys, walked past me, and stepped into the driveway. I followed him to the door, but he didn't turn around. The U-Haul wasn't even there yet, but he didn't wait. He got into the rental truck he'd parked out front, put it in drive, and disappeared down the street without looking back. And just like that, he was gone. The silence that followed was the worst part. No more phone calls from Edward. No text from the kids. No one asking how I was holding up. Just the hum of the refrigerator in my childhood kitchen and the sound of my own thoughts echoing around the ranch house Maggie let me stay in. I tried Olivia first. I waited a week, then sent a careful message. Me, I know things are still raw, but I love you. That's never changed. She responded 2 days later. Olivia, please forward any tax documents to my accountant. I'll email you the info. That was it. No, love you too. No, I'm okay. Just logistics. Like I was someone she used to know. Like I'd been filed away with the rest of her past. Ben didn't respond at all. I called him once, no answer. Left a voicemail. Just a simple, I hope you're well. I'm thinking about you. That was 3 weeks ago. Still nothing. My parents, of all people, were the ones trying to hold on. My father called from Florida, his voice soft with age and disappointment. You need to keep trying, he said. They're your children. Time heals. I wanted to believe him. I did. But every time I looked at my phone and saw the empty inbox, I felt the truth sink in a little deeper. I had crossed a line no apology could fix. I tried to rebuild in small ways. Got a part-time job at a local artisan shop in town, painted pottery, folded receipts, smiled at tourists passing through. The kind of quiet work that didn't require anyone to know my last name or my history. I said yes to every shift they offered. Kept my hands busy. Kept my mind from wandering. But at night, it always crept in. I'd sit in the guest room with a box of old photo albums on my lap, pages filled with birthday parties, first day of school pictures, backyard cookouts. A life that looked so solid in pictures. A life that now felt like it belonged to someone else. I kept one of the journals tucked in the nightstand drawer. The original one. The one Edward found. I told myself I'd throw it out. Burn it, maybe. But I never did. Sometimes I'd open it, read a random entry, and wonder what version of myself wrote those words. I didn't recognize her. Not anymore. What kind of woman documents betrayal like it's worth remembering? What kind of mother lets secrets grow so deep her daughter forgets who she is? I used to believe that writing things down made them real, like facts on a page couldn't be denied. Now, I know better. Some truths, when they come too late, don't bring clarity. They bring fire. and ashes, and silence. I built my marriage on paper-thin honesty, and when the light finally hit it, the whole thing went up in flames. There's nothing left to salvage. Only the slow, lonely work of sifting through what remains.